So this is the first lecture on Python, and we're gonna start Python from the scratch. We will cover almost every aspect of Python in this tutorial. And one of the focus of having this tutorial is to make you ready to solve any data-driven problem. Mainly, this is more aligned toward data science and machine learning. Okay.
Yes.
Today, we'll just look at the introduction part of Python. As I mentioned, this is going to be from scratch. So it's good to know some basics about the programming language that we're going to discover, some of the theory part of it, and you will be able to write your first Python program today.
Okay, yeah.
So let's see a little bit in history part of Python, how Python came in existence. So Python was invented by a Dutch programmer named Guido van Rossum in 1991 as one of his hobby projects in CWI, Netherlands. Okay, so you see how a hobby project created 30 years back is now changing the world, right? And there must be one question in your mind when you signed up for Python programming. Why this name Python, right? So so interesting. There's a reason for that as well. So the Dutch programmer who invented this programming language, he was a big fan of one popular TV show of that time. It used to be broadcasted in BBC, and the name of that show was Monty Python's Flying Circus, right? And I think that was the show he was big fan of, and from that show he had taken the name Python. Okay, so this is a very interesting reason why he named Python. Okay, now Python right now it is one of the most widely used and user-friendly programming language. Okay, if you will Google, if you search in Stack Overflow, you'll see that right now Python is trending all around the globe. Right, it is most widely used and it's most user-friendly language. What I mean by saying user-friendly language is the syntax you'll be seeing in Python. It's very, very simple. It is almost like you're writing a plain English. Okay, of course, plain English doesn't mean that literally the plain English, but comparatively, if you have to compare this with other programming language like Java, C, C++, C#, you'll see that Python syntax are very much aligned with plain English language. Okay, and there's so much of benefit we're getting with Python, right? Now it must be sounding like Python is a really go-to language, right? Yeah, of course that's true, but it comes with one very small cost, and that cost is the execution time. Right? So if you're writing any program in C or C++, and if you are writing the same program in Python, right, the time it will take to execute will be much faster in C or C++ compared to Python. So this is a slight, drawback we have in Python. I would say it's a drawback. I would rather say it as a trade-off, right? But that execution time should not really matter because typically that is in order of milliseconds, microsecond level. So in real life, we can live with that. Right? Still, it is much faster, I would say. Okay. So this is a little bit introduction about Python. Now we will be seeing some of the very cool feature of Python, which will motivate you to learn Python and prefer Python over any other language. Okay. So the number one thing is Python is open source. Open source means what? It is freely available. You can download Python at free of cost. You can develop any software with Python free of cost. You did not to pay anyone any royalty fee or some software download charge. It's entirely free. Okay, it's easy to learn. As I mentioned, you will see that a lot of syntax we will be having in Python. It's very similar to plain English. Okay, it is the language which offers a lot of built-in high-level data structure. Okay, so what I meant by saying data structure, Data structure is nothing but, they are like a tool which helps to store data in an efficient way, right? If I give you a list of 1,000 student name, right, and I'll ask you to store it, how would you store it in pen paper, right? You will write the name of every person name line by line, right? You should have that much number of lines in your page, right? So you are arranging the name of people in your uh, paper line by line. This is one way of getting a feel of data structure, right? Putting the data in a place in a structured, systematic way, so that, whenever if you want to retrieve any data out of it, you can quickly do it. If you arrange those names sequentially line by line, if I ask you to give any name, specific name, you will be able to do it quickly, right? But if you do it in a very haphazard way in a page, it will take time for yourself also to find the name which I'm asking for and giving it back to me, right? So Python comes with some built-in data structure, and those data structures are list, tuple, dictionary. We will be seeing each of those data structure in detail, but just I'm introducing the name of it. The third important point is it's a general purpose programming language. What I meant by saying general purpose is, you can use Python to do variety of tasks, right? You can use Python for building some web applications. You can use Python for doing data science tasks. There are n number of things that you can do with Python. It's a general purpose language. It's not specific for any specific task, right? There are certain programming language, for example, R. R is one programming language which is more commonly used for doing statistical analysis. I won't say that R is only limited to that, but it's more specific towards statistical analysis. It's a language of statistician, right? But we do not have any story like that with Python, right? The people who are building web development, they are using Python. The people who are using data science, they are also using Python. So Python is not aligned with strongly aligned with any kind of specific task, right? Is it clear till now?
Yeah.
Awesome. Now the fourth point says that it's a strongly typed language. What I meant by strongly typed language, in any programming language you have data, right? You have data. So Python has also its some of the data commonly used data type. For example, you will have integer, you will have float, you will have characters. So Python have data, different types of data, and the operation that you can perform with this data is depending upon their types. For example, if you are having an integer data, you can add two integer data together, right? If you're having one integer data and one float data, still you can do that. Still you can add. For example, you can add 5 plus 10.5. That will equal to 15.5, right? But you cannot do addition between characters and string, between characters and float, right? So this is what meant strongly typed. Strongly typed means the operations that you can do with that data depends upon its type, right?
Okay.
Fourth, it is a dynamic language. So what I meant by dynamic language is, if you have done some C++ programming, there what programmer used to do that, if suppose they have to use any variable in their program, right, they have to declare it beforehand along with its type. Whereas in Python we do not have any limitation like that. For example, if you want to store a integer into a variable, you can do it straight away. You need not to declare the type of it. Let me annotate and explain this to you. See what happens in C languages, and this is the Python. Right. So you want to you know have a variable and you want to store some number to it, right? In C, what you will do, first of all, you need to declare the variable name like int var, right? And then you can assign some integer only to this variable, right? You cannot store any other data type into this variable var, because you have declared the type of it as int. Whereas in Python, first of all, we need not to do any declaration of variable type. I need not to write int where if I want to store 10 into variable where. Okay, right? Also, it doesn't mandate me that I can only store integer value into my where variable. Later, if I decide I can store some floating value also into this will not give me any error. I can store some string value also, like cat, right? So it doesn't bound me to assign specific data type with my variable. It's dynamic. Okay, hope this is clear to you now. Fifth is, it's a high level programming language, right? So there are basically two kinds of programming language, but to be honest, one is the low level programming language, another is the high level programming language. Low level programming language means the language which is more towards zeros and one. Computer is dealing with only zeros and ones, right? It doesn't understand English or any other language. It only works with zeros and ones. So the programming language which is more closer to zeros and one, those are called low level programming language. Whereas the programming language which can give instruction to computer in language like English, right? Those are called high level programming language. So Python is high level programming language because we can write the instructions in Python using English as the language. We need not to deal with zeros and ones with Python. It supports object-oriented programming features. Right? So what is object-oriented programming features means? Here everything will be an object, right? Everything will be object. Object will store data, will perform operations between objects. You will understand this object-oriented features a bit later when we will see some of the aspect of it. But for now, you can just understand in Python, everything is object. Okay, it's portable. That means what? You can run any Python code in Windows. You can run the same Python code in Mac, Linux, right? It's not platform dependent, right? The next thing which is important is it is interpreted language. Okay, so there are again you can divide any programming language into two categories. One is the compiled language, another is interpreted language. So compiled language are the languages where compiler is used, and what that compiler does is it will take your entire program and it will convert in a form which can be run by your system, which your system can understand, right? For example, C. So C is a compiled language. So you have a compiler in C that will take your program and it will convert in a form which can be understood by computer, right? And it will do this entirely in one shot. Whereas what happens in case of interpreted languages, you have an interpreter and it translates your code line by line, right? So in Python, I have written some instruction, right? I have written here some instruction. What your interpreter will do, first of all, it will take this line and it will convert in a form which system can understand, like mainly system can understand in form of zeros and ones. So it will convert this instruction in a format which system can understand. It will take another line, it will do translation, right? So it will do line by line, right? So this is the feature which helps you to, try and test. For example, you need not to write your entire program in one shot and then see whether your program is generating correct output or not. What you can do is, right, you can write one line of your program, you can execute this line, and you can see that whether this line is giving you correct output or not. If not, then you can modify this line, right? Once you are sure that this line is correct, you can go to the next line, write this code and execute this, and likewise you can develop the program. Whereas in case of compiled language, everything you need to write in one shot. Once you have written, you will execute it, and then you will get to know that whether your program is correct or not, right? So this experimentation of programming, it's very well facilitated when we are having an interpreted language. Okay. It comes with automatic garbage collection. So what I mean by automatic garbage collection is, since we will be dealing with data, right? So sometimes what happens is you have declared some variable, you have assigned some value to it, but you're not using that variable, right? Or I should say the memory management part, that is something you need not to worry about. Python will take care by its own, right? You need not to really worry how system is allocating memory to your computations. If you have declared some variable, assigned some value, but you're not using it, how that garbage will be taken care of. You do not to worry about anything. Python will do it at the back end. Okay. Then comes a very important part, library and framework. So personally, what I feel is the ESP of Python, the best thing about Python is library and framework support. What I mean by saying library is nothing but it's a collection of all the codes that you can leverage to fast track your development. For example, if I give you a task, and I tell you, can you write a program that will do the factorial of any number, right? You can write. If you know the language, you can write by your own, right? But what you can do is you can check whether this code is readily available in Python or not, because I'm pretty much sure that somebody has already done this task, and what they have done is they have packaged that piece of code in form of a library. I can just use their code by importing that library in my environment, right? And I can pass my data into their functions and get the output. I need not to write that code from scratch. That is library, right? This library thing is clear.
Yeah, clear.
Okay. It's a very versatile language. So when I say versatile language, it means that this same Python can be used for a lot of work. For example, you can use Python for web applications. If you want to develop a website, you can use Python. If you want to do network applications, you can still use Python. If you want to develop game, Python can be used there. If you want to come up with some software, you can use Python. For robotics, Python is there. But mainly in this course, we're going to focus how Python can help us to do machine learning and AI stuff. Right? So this was a little bit theory part of it, right? Some of the features we discussed about Python. Right? These are not really important from application perspective. I understand that, but this could be some, some go-to questions if you are sitting in an interview for an interviewer.
Yes.
Right. sometimes, they straight away ask a question like, how do you manage library in Python, or what are the different applications that you can come up with Python, right? So this theory part is really important to know, just to tackle some of the preliminary questions you can have in interviews if you are setting for any data science role or some Python specific role. Okay. All right. So enough of theory. Now let's do the coding part once. Let's do the main task. So here you'll see this is a very small code just to print anything in your screen. Okay. So normally whenever we start learning any programming language, it's a tradition that people start with hello world program. Okay. They write hello world. They used to print hello world in the screen. So you see, if you want to print anything in your screen, it's very straightforward. You just need to use a function called print. So this print is built-in function, right? This Python will provide it to you, and you need to pass your string that you want to be printed in your screen within this double quote, right? So for example, if I want to print hello world, I can simply do, and this will print it, right? So this is a very straightforward small code, but this is how we start any programming language. Okay. All right. Now moving to the next module for today's lecture. Till here, any doubt?
No, it's clear.
Okay. So how do we learn any language? First of all, we learn the basic part of it, right? For example, if you want to learn English, you need to know first of all alphabets of ABCD. You need to learn the basic grammar of it, right? So if you want to learn Python, we will start with the basic elements of Python, right? What are the different rules we are having, grammar rules to learn Python, right? Once we are comfortable with these basic entities, we can combine them together, we can stitch them together to write some code. Okay. So today we will unlock two very important part in Python, two small entities in Python. One is keyword and other is identifier. Okay. Let's start with the keyword. What is meant by keyword? Keyword is basically a reserved word in Python, right? So we cannot use a keyword as a variable name or any function name. So in Python there are certain reserved words, and whenever you see those words, you can immediately understand that these are keyword, right? Why keyword is used? So keyword are used to define the syntax and structure of your Python language. Okay. So for example, if you want to import any library into your work environment, right? So there's a keyword for that, which is import, right? If you want to write some conditional statement, there's a keyword for that, if or else. And you'll see that these keywords are very much in line with plain English. Okay. Now, these keywords are case sensitive, right? So for example, if you are having a keyword import here, right? You're having a keyword here, import. So this import doesn't mean this import. If you'll write import like this, it will be wrong, because it's a case sensitive. It has to be like this only. Okay. At present in Python, we are having total 33 different keywords, right? And this keep on changing, right? So if tomorrow you see, if you'll Google search and if you'll, instead of 33, you find 33, you see 35 or 37. Please do not blame me that I taught 33, because this keep on changing. As the scope of language broadens, you'll see people introduce more keyword. I know it may be very intimidating to look into this list of keyword at initial go, at first go. Please do not get really worried about this. We will see each of this keyword as we will go along, right?
Yeah.
Now the next thing is identifier. So what I meant by identifier is nothing but it's just a name given to an entity, right? So typically, if you want to come up with any logic, right, you want to create some function, right? That function will do certain task for, so you have to name that function, right? First of all, you have to name that function. That name of function is nothing but identifier. If you want to come up with some class means the Python class, right? You have to name it, right? That name is nothing but identifier. If you build a variable, if you have created a variable and you want to assign some value to it, the name of that variable will be nothing but identifier. So identifier is nothing but the name that is given to entities, and these entities could be anything. It can be variable, it can be a function, it can be class, it could be anything, right? It helps to differentiate one entity from another, which is obvious, right? Now, if you have to create an identifier, you need to keep certain rules in your mind. Okay. So what are those rules? So let us assume that you want to create a variable, right? So you are interested in creating variable. The first rule says that this variable, which is actually the name of entity, it can start with either alphabet or underscore, right? So let's say that you want to create a variable, and in that variable you want to store fruit name. So this is valid. This variable name is valid. You can create like this also. This is also valid. You can create like this also, right? But you cannot create something like this. And what is x here? This x can be any numeric value, right? It can be any numeric value. So the point is, any identifier, it should always start with either alphabet or underscore, right? It should never start with any numeric value. You can put numbers afterwards. For example, if you want to store 10 fruits, right? So there you can do something like fruit 10. This is perfectly valid, but this is not valid. Okay.
Okay. But X fruit will be valid, right?
X.
X fruit, if we write, because it can be a word also, right? Sometime.
Yeah, it can be a word, but it cannot take any numeric value. You cannot have something
Okay.
like 0 fruit,
Yeah, that's right.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as we have just seen the keyword, and we said that keyword is a reserve word, right? So you cannot name any variable as your keyword. So you cannot have any variable like if, because if is already reserved. It is already a keyword, right? So you cannot name any function, any variable, any class as the name of your keyword, right? So
Yeah.
make sure that you're not conflicting this. You're not assigning any function name which is also a keyword. Okay. For example, if you will do that, if you will assign some keyword, right? If you will assign some keyword, it will give you an error. For example, here global is a keyword. If I am trying to assign one to global, it will give me an invalid syntax, because the word global is already reserved, right? It's a keyword. And how do you know whether it's a keyword or not? So if you're doing any if you're using any specific editor, for example, here I'm using Google Colab, right? So if you name your variable and if it becomes blue, if it changes its color, that means what? It is a keyword. For example, here global, right? You can see it's a blue. For example, if I do def, this is also a keyword. That's why it became blue. If I do if, it is a keyword. You say that, you see the color is got changed. Now it is more purple. So it's a keyword. Whereas if I assign, if I write name, right? So name is not a keyword. You can assign any value to it.
Yes.
Okay. Now, as I mentioned, we cannot use any special character in our variable name. We can only use underscore, but we cannot, have any special character in our variable name or any other function name. Okay. Only use the combination of alphabets, numbers, and underscore, and in that too also make sure that you do not end up using numbers in front of your in front place of your variable or identifier. Okay, so these are the basic rules we have for creating identifier. Any question in this?
No.
Okay. This identifier name can be of any length. You can have a variable of length 1. You can have a variable of length 100. Nobody is, stopping you. You have the full freedom. You have full creativity. But just as a piece of advice, always keep the name of your identifier relatable to the context of problem that you're trying to solve. For example, you are trying to compute simple interest, right? So you can keep your variable name like SI, which stands for simple interest. If you're trying to compute compound interest, so you can keep your variable name SCI, right? So that it would be easy for you, and as well as easy for the person who is reading your code. Okay. Now, things to remember in this part is, first of all, Python is case sensitive language, right? So you cannot have this CI is equal to this capital CI. This CI is not equal to CI, right? This is one identifier, this is another identifier, right? Always give identifier a name that makes sense, right? For example, if you are doing a count operation, right? So instead of just writing C for count, you can write count also. So that is more, related to your context. Do not put any empty space between variable. For example, if you are storing a simple interest, so do not create a variable like simple interest. Do not put an empty space here. If at all you have to make variable name like this, put an underscore there, but do not keep an empty space between your variable name. Okay. Any question till here?
No.
Okay. So let's do some coding then. Right. Okay. So I'll show you some of commonly used data type and how we can define it in Python. So I'm first of all, I'm creating a variable. Let's say that I want to create a variable that will store age, right? So I have age and I have kept age as 29. I have age. I have another name variable which is like Ashu, and I have another variable like height, which will store height like 167.5 centimeter. right? I have another variable, job, and this is true. And I have another variable, like, complex. Okay, complex is already a keyword. So 3 plus 5j. Okay, so here I have defined total 5 variables and I've assigned some value to it, right? So can you tell me what kind of variable it is? This is an integer variable, right? Because I'm assigning an integer to it. This is string variable because I'm assigning a string to it. This is float variable because I'm assigning float to it. And this is Boolean variable because I'm assigning a Boolean value to it. Boolean value means true or false, right? This is a complex variable because I'm assigning complex number to it, right? And as I mentioned, Python is dynamic type language. So let us understand what is dynamic type language by doing some hands-on. So I can have another age, let's say age 2, which is 15, right? So I can add these two age, right? Because they both are of same type. I can have age plus age 2. This will give me an output of 44, 29 plus 15, right? I can also have age like 15.5, 15 years and 6 months. Still, this is fine, right? Because we can add float with integer. But the moment if I do something like this, age and name, this will give me an error, right? Why?
Yes.
Because I cannot add an integer with string. So this is what I meant by saying dynamic type, right? The types are different and it doesn't allow to do operations between these two types. That's why we saw an error here. Okay. Okay. Now let's do a small exercise. If you want to build a calculator using Python, you can do that. Okay. So what are the typical operations that we can do with Python that we can do with calculator?
Yes.
We can do addition, right? So if I want to do addition, I'll just simply do 10 plus 5, right? And this will do addition. If I want to do subtraction, by the way, one thing I forgot to tell you, this thing which I'm writing here, no, this is called comment line. So anything that will start with this hashtag, right? That means it is a comment. So this comment is something for developer, something for you only or your audience. It is not for Python. Python will simply ignore it, right? It will not take in account comments in executions. We write comments to make our code more readable, right? If I'll write addition, I'll get to know that I'm doing addition here, right? This comment is to make your code more readable. It will not hamper the execution of your program. I can do multiplication also, right? So 10, I have asterisk sign for doing multiplications. I can do division also. Right. So I want to do 60 divided by 32. Right. So I'm just trying to show you what are the common arithmetic operations that we can do with Python, right? So this is called division. And if suppose I want to do floor division, right? So what I meant by floor division is I do not want to take this fractional part. I can have only output as 1, right? So that is called floor division. I can have something like this 60 divided by 32. You'll see that the fractional part will not be there. There's another operation called modulo operator. Yep, you were saying something?
No, it's clear. Yeah.
Modulo operator. So what is modulo operator? Modulo operator is nothing but it returns the remainder of operation, right? For example, if I want to do 15 divided by 4. By the way, the sign for modulo operator is this percentile. Yeah. So if I'll divide 15 by 4, the remainder will be 3, right? So it returns the remainder. I can do exponentiation also. If you want to do 3 to the power 3, right? So no, let's do 3 to the power 4. So 3 double star 4. This will do 3 to the power 4, which is 81. Right?
Yeah. So we can't write 3 power 4. We have to write 3 double star 4 only.
Yes, yes. This is a code for doing 3 power 4. Right?
Yeah.
If you want to do some complex operation, complex number operation, right? So I'm having one complex number 1 plus 3j, right? And I want to add this complex number with another complex number 2 minus 2j, right? I can do that also. So this support complex operation also, right? This is the result of this complex addition. Okay. So you can use Python to come up with this calculator. Okay. Any question, any doubt?
No, it's very clear.
Okay. So I'll have a quick assignment, a quick question for you. Let me know the output, right? So I want to compute a simple interest, right? How would I compute? First of all, what is the formula of simple interest?
PNR by 100.
Exactly. So let's say that my principal is P, time is N, and R is my rate. Okay, by 100. This is my formula for simple interest, right? Okay. Now, let's say that my principal amount is 10,000. My terms of return is for 10 years, and my rate, let's say that you have done investment on FD, so you're not going to get much return. It is something like 5.9, 5.8, right? And now you want to compute what would be your interest, right? So just to print SI. This for this 1,000, you're gonna get 580 rate of return after 580 is a return that you'll be getting after 10 years. So the point which I'm trying to make here is you can do Python for doing some mathematical computation also. You can implement any kind of formula in Python and get the result. Right? Similarly, like the way we have done for simple interest, what is your task is you have to do it for compound interest. Take any arbitrary value. Like here we have taken p equal to 1,000 and equal to 10. You take any arbitrary value, do it for compound interest. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll take a pause here. I do not want to flood you with information, right? So whatever thing that we have covered, invest some time going through it again, and we'll meet tomorrow.